No one has hobbies anymore. Who have side hustles, who have portfolios, who have content calendars. But now, everything we do must mean something, and somewhere in all of that, we lost joy. Somewhere between passion and profit, between doing what we love and proving that it was worth something, we turned hobbies into jobs, rest into performance, and every quiet moment into content. Because what even is a hobby anymore exactly? Is it something we do for fun? Is it something we aim to pursue? Is it something we want to get better at? Or is it simply a release valve? I don't know. Because we seem to have lost the plot somewhere between making money and making memories, between play and productivity. And I'm not sure how to find that line again. Because, and this is the crux of it all, those two things are not mutually exclusive. An artist does art for joy, and so documenting and sharing that shouldn't really stifle that. But there comes a point where the focus inevitably shifts from the actual process and the pleasure of making to the results, to the validation, and finally to the profits. And then, well, that's where we risk losing it all. Because it stops being a hobby, it becomes a hustle. The 9 to 5 hate is a bit much. Sure, it has its flaws. But if you think about it, what else is a person to do? Not all of us can be independent artists and writers. Not everyone has the opportunity, the skill, and frankly, even the want to avoid falling into a decade-spanning routine that does the job. The 9 to 5 is a system, maybe a problematic one, but a system nonetheless. But systems are also boring. And more than that, they appear outwardly stale. And when things turn stale, the traditional job becomes the villain, and do what you love becomes the battle cry. It's then that hobbies turn from a release, from something we do to just de-stress, to an alternative. An alternative that's now not just something to do, but a skill to master. And then, before we know it, it turns into an occupation, and suddenly that hobby becomes our livelihood. But that's not a bad thing, right? I've mentioned before that turning something you would do for free into something you get paid for is not a bad thing at all. So what's the problem? The problem is the effort behind it all. Let's take an example. I love playing games. I especially love playing multiplayer games. And over the past few years, I've dedicated a lot of time, effort, and just practice to improving. But this is entirely out of fun, so much so that the moment I feel myself not enjoying it, I have the option to just stop. If tomorrow something happens and I lose interest in playing, I could just stop and walk away. And we really do underestimate how important those last two words are. Because that's not the case with an occupation. Because a job isn't just a skill, it's a commitment. It's a commitment to an employer, to a company, and to a team, and most importantly, to yourself. And when we turn a hobby into a job, we lose the freedom to simply stop. And it stops being something we get to do and becomes something we must. Because now, our time, income, even identity depends on it. The 9 to 5, for all its many flaws, at least admits that it's work. It doesn't pretend to be our joy. But the hustle, it sells itself as freedom, passion, purpose, all while demanding far more for far less, until we realize that most of us didn't escape the system, we just internalized it. We made joy conditional, made it work, and called it liberation. I love to write. I always have and probably always will. Writing for me has always been a way to shush the incoherent yammerings in my head. And this channel, as small as it may be, has turned out to be the perfect excuse. The perfect excuse to write, just for myself. And do I want this channel to grow? Do I want it to be financially successful someday? Absolutely, obviously. But I am not waiting for the pin to drop. This is difficult to explain, but it's like I want it and I'm actively chasing it, but I'm not crippling myself for it. So, what this is more than a hobby, but it falls somewhere short of a hustle. And that is something to consider as well. That, as always, this isn't black and white, and there is indeed a way to balance this. There is a way to still enjoy a hobby without destroying the fun of it. I would argue that this space is actually where most creative people lay. It's the sweet spot where you do something for yourself and maybe someday get paid for it. But paid, that word always feels a little unsavory to me. Getting paid makes it sound like it has to be a job, like the only reason to do anything is if there is a payout. And that to me is the crux of it all. If the only reason we do anything is the money behind it, something beautiful gets lost. The issue isn't compensation. The issue isn't wanting to be rewarded. The issue, simply put, is the intent. There is this great video I watched recently. Congrats, you have no personality. It's actually what led to the creation of this one. I highly recommend checking it out. One of my favorite points she brings up is this notion that the concept of hobbies is no longer cool. Somewhere between binging self-help books and productivity podcasts, we collectively decided to equate not caring with being cool. It becomes a concern when the most socially applauded way to react to anything is with a shrug and an eye roll. Hobbies, by their nature, are deeply personal, and hobbies, by their nature, can also be niche, weird, and just strange. I keenly remember this one time I was out with a few friends and made the severe mistake of exposing my hobby of reading. Cue the raised brows, the side eyes, and most frustratingly, the question. So, like, you review books on YouTube. It's one of those things that stuck with me for a long time. And all this to not even mention that reading, cooking, gaming belong to the very, very small minority of hobbies that are somewhat socially acceptable. What about writing fanfics? What about LARPing? Or being in a tabletop? Or a bazillion other things? If a man cannot even admit to his love for books without being judged for it, can you imagine the sheer amount of people who hide their passions, or worse, kill them off completely because of some dumb social standard? The same is true of the idea that the best hobbies are the ones you can monetize. Because if I can't monetize my hobby, what even is the point, right? How did this happen? How did the world turn into a place where binging Netflix or scrolling TikTok is far more accepted than taking the time and the effort to build something? From outright mean comments to snarky questions and confused stares, we have gotten really, really good at embarrassing and putting down people. It's got to a point when no one is allowed to be transparently bad at anything. And if they're only allowed to make that their whole shtick. There are food YouTubers who lean into the whole I am bad at cooking angle, but let's be honest, most of them aren't actually bad. They are either very skilled or good enough to convincingly play the part. Because if you are not good at something, the only way to show that is by performing, with a wink to an audience and a smile. Authenticity is dead. We killed it with our polished edits and curated content. And the most ironic part is that how do you even blame anyone? We are scared. We are scared to admit that we have an interest in anything that's even slightly unconventional. But circling back to this post's original point, most hobbies are not lucrative. So, how do we reconcile our need for value, the fear of judgment, and our passion? Well, it's actually quite simple. We don't. As they say, you cannot have your cake, eat it, and get paid for it. As sad as it may be, you have to choose between a hobby that's just that and a hobby that can be more. There's this strange voice that lives in the back of every creative person's head, whispering, "You could do something with this." It starts innocently. Maybe someone compliments your art, maybe a friend tells you to start a page, and suddenly the gears start turning. Could this be something? That voice is relentless. It's the one that turns your first knitted scarf into an Etsy store, your guitar hobby into a SoundCloud page, your joy into output. And as the days pass, we begin equating this thing we do, this hobby, not with the nebulous idea of self fulfillment and catharsis, but with something else. And so it becomes a seesaw. One side holding the indistinct concept of joy, the other holding the immediately captivating concept of validation, profit, and well, success. But in order to gain the latter, we often are forced to give up the former. To become profitable, we have to give up on playing. To pursue validation, we have to give up on doing this just for ourselves. And how can anyone be blamed, right? Because just about all of us could do with a bit more cash. And it's so easy to follow the siren song of "this will change my life." That's not inherently bad, obviously. But the issue lies in the intention behind it. And that's when the lines start to disappear. Because this seesaw isn't balanced. In fact, it's the opposite. The side holding profit, validation, success, it's actually a lot heavier. It carries an invisible string of expectations and obligations. A string that's so damn easy to overlook until it's far too late. Everything is just a hair more fun with someone else around. Of course, how long that hair is would depend on the person, and especially for something like a hobby, sharing it with others can be a very fulfilling experience. We all know this. We inherently desire to belong to something, to be one with a group, and this tribalism makes us want to share the things we're passionate about. But, and here's the catch, we started to confuse sharing with publishing. We no longer just show a friend our sketchbook, we make a post, we optimize captions and hashtags, we check for likes, and we feel anxious when we don't get them. And so, what began as a moment of connection morphs into performance. It's tragic, really, because sharing a hobby used to be the most wholesome human thing. But now, it's less of "look at this thing I made, isn't it cool?" and more "look at this thing I made, do you like it?" Because somewhere along the way, we stopped sharing and started performing. Sketchbooks became posts, moments became metrics, and now we don't just want to share, we want to be validated. It feels extra to make a whole video about hobbies of all things. But then again, it sort of feels necessary. Because the world increasingly feels like it's trudging towards one that's entirely rank and file. We already are that in some ways. We have our careers, our jobs, our side hustles. We use the same phones, hate the same politicians, and follow the same trends. Individuality, eccentricity, and creativity feel like things we are meant to keep within the four walls of our home. Or worse, things we are meant to keep within the walls of our mind. Because we didn't kill hobbies on purpose. It was never intentional. It was, more than anything else, the result of the world around us changing. And we didn't realize when the lines were crossed because we are so used to crossing them. And maybe it's time to return to our roots. Maybe it's time we turned off the camera, uninstalled the apps, and just did. for only the sake of doing. If you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for being here.